This video took way too long to get out, but I think I found the strongest duo in Anime Vanguards. In my last Ichigo showcase, I talked about how I wanted to show Giselle. Once I saw Giselle's passives, I knew I needed to get Yamamoto with him to show off the true power of Giselle. And I believe once you combine these two, and I've also got a few other units that will work really well with Giselle, they can be pretty unstoppable. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So Giselle's first passive is called Corpse Party. Every 5 attacks, Giselle will enter a stance, and while in this stance, any enemy that is killed during this stance will be revived for 30% of Giselle's damage. Giselle's second passive is called Pure Evil. I believe on upgrade 4, Giselle will gain access to Hitsugaya, and on upgrade 8, he will get Bambietta. Both of these units will attack separately, but what's really important is actually right after these two, is that Giselle will buff the HP of summons up to 50% of their maximum HP. Now I believe this is insanely broken. This moveset is clearly supposed to set up Giselle as a support character for summon characters. You want Giselle to constantly enter the stance to revive any enemies that are killed. His buff to summons actually applies to his own summons as well. So if there's 50 summons on the map that are his, they will have 30% of his attack stat on top of a 50% increase. But that's not where his strength lies. His strength lies within other units. So before we go on, I'm going to go ahead and show you Giselle's moveset, how he looks, how he attacks, and everything. So first off, let's go ahead and watch Giselle. Basically, all he does is throw little skulls, and that's the only attack he has. You go ahead and watch Bambietta here. So he'll jump up and shoot at the ground. This guy is going to jump forward and do a little ice slash. So as you can see, we have 3 Giselles going off, and units are just passively being summoned. Now these summons are only 3.9k damage. However, keep in mind that these are just always going to be summoning, because I have 3 Giselles spawned in. Basically, he's always going to be in that stance, so these aren't really ever going to stop, so there's always basically going to be 50 units on screen. One small critique is that currently I've noticed Giselle, when you spawn him in and he starts summoning units, it tanks performance. I mean, it really hits performance, and I have a pretty beefy computer. I mean, I've been playing Monster Hunter Wilds at max settings, and this Roblox game is somehow running worse than that, so hopefully they'll look into that, fix it, because it really should not be running like this. But Giselle really shines with our next unit, Head Captain Yamamoto. And very fitting to his title, his first passive is also called Head Captain. Every attack he does will inflict burn that will deal 25% of his attack stat. However, for every burning unit in his range, he will gain 10% damage and lose 2 SPA. This is up to 30% damage and minus 10% SPA. But this is not where he truly shines. On why I think he makes the best duo in the game with Giselle is actually South. Every enemy he kills is going to be revived as a skeleton, with its health being 40% of his attack stat. And when a skeleton runs into an enemy, will afflict that enemy with burn. The amount of damage this burn does is dependent on how many skeletons are on the field. So this could be up to 30%. And finally, Yamamoto's last passive is called Release. He will gain the active ability North, and any enemy that walks into his range is afflicted with burn, but once that burn is reapplied, it increases its damage by 1%. Now you can imagine how strong this unit is with Giselle, because Giselle's second passive, combos with Yamamoto's skeletons. The best setup with these duos, we have a Monarch Yamamoto with Ethereal Giselle. I don't have Monarch Yamamoto. I'm not willing to spend the money to force the pity of 2,500 rerolls. However, Yamamoto will cause summons to be on the field at all times. Giselle will also force summons to be on the field at all times. There will almost always be 50 summons on the field, meaning that not only is Giselle's summons being buffed by 50%, but Yamamoto's summons are going to be buffed by 50%. Yamamoto already has a pretty good DPS, but with summons, I truly think you could probably beat any content in this game with just Yamamoto and Giselle. When you summon Yamamoto, his basic attack is obviously going to be him running forward, slashing. He has a weird circle with cone. His next up is going to automatically be a full AoE. When he hits the floor and then does a swing. And then he's going to get a cone and his active ability. I didn't talk about his active ability yet, but basically he'll swing his sword and that will cause all skeletons to stop moving. Now I know a lot of people are kind of confused on why this is good, but basically if I do this, these skeletons will never move. This basically means that his second passive is going to be a lot easier to keep consistent. Because when a skeleton dies, you know, let's say you have 15 skeletons on the map. If a skeleton dies, walks into the enemy, instead of dealing 30%, they will only deal 28 because one of them just died. It counts how many are on the field, not how many were on the field at the time. Basically, you just want to use this to keep consistent damage in the back. Finally, we have West, which is his final attack, which is a big AoE. It will make proccing his first ability super easy. Just looks really cool. But another thing is that if you stop these skeletons back here, it's actually going to also help proc Giselle's ability. Reminder, you need summons alive for Giselle to buff summons. You can guarantee that not only will Yamamoto's summons always be dealing the maximum of 30%, but you can also guarantee that Giselle, no matter what, will always be buffing every summon by 50%. That's why I think North is a really important ability for Yamamoto and Giselle, respectively. Again, this is just working into this idea that these two, peanut butter and jelly, they work perfectly with each other. There should be absolutely no reason why you would not want to run Giselle with Yamamoto. If you have Lilila Monarch, I would also argue that they work amazing with each other. But if you know how she works, one of her main issues is that she has to build up that 40% damage. If you put down Yamamoto or Giselle, and they start summoning, you don't have to get her to upgrade forward for her to start building up that damage, that 40% damage. She'll just instantly start building it, and this is massive because this also buffs her Berserk. And speaking of Berserker, Giselle also buffs Berserker's HP by 50%. So you can keep summoning him, increases his HP over and over, and you can get Berserker to a pretty ridiculous HP count with just Giselle alone. Of course, Giselle's buff also applies to Sung Jinwoo, and will also buff his summons, so they have 50% more HP than they otherwise would. And finally, it also buffs Alucard. Alucard summons are also gonna have 50% more HP. Alucards aren't a huge deal because you kind of want them to be low HP so they can die quicker to give him the damage boost. But I know this video took a really long time to come out, and I don't have much else to say about Giselle and Yamamoto. I just see a lot of people say Giselle is completely useless, but then are like, oh, Yamamoto is so insanely good. And I think Giselle is insanely good. I think Giselle is almost broken in how good of a support he is. But yeah, that's gonna be it from me today, guys. I really appreciate all the support I got on my last video, but basically the point of these videos is to show that some of these units people take a look at and think I'm really bad are actually pretty good if you build around them. So I think the next unit I'm gonna talk about that a lot of people are overlooking is gonna be Kenpachi, because I believe Kenpachi is also a really strong unit. I don't know when I'll get Kenpachi done. I need to do some grinding. I'm completely out of stones. But my next video will be on Kenpachi and why I think he is super underrated this update. Keep an eye out on that. Bye-bye.